Get away from her, you bitch!
Oh, shut up, you tart!
Who disrupts my coronation?
Get to the chopper!
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another fun-filled episode of Hun Ya Geek is Showing. On tonight's episode, we're going to pose a question. Is originality a bit of a myth? But up first, joining me for this week's episode, because yet again, Guy is off gigging. Hey, Guy, hope you have fun gigging tonight. At the time of recording, anyway, this will go out on a Wednesday. He won't be gigging on a Wednesday.
He won't be gigging then.
Just to let
But he
people
is
know,
gigging now.
joining me tonight is the mouth of the South, Derbyshire, Jimmy Lee Clifford. How you doing, honey?
I'm doing all right. 3 weeks in a row. This is difficult now.
Hey, you wanted the podcasting life. This is what it
I
comes.
did.
But moving swiftly on, we will get straight into the shout-outs.
And the comms up back up.
Yeah, and up first, the comms are back up. We got rid of Uhura. She got sacked, unfortunately.
Placed her for Worf. He's doing a better job.
Wolf's on tactical now. But up first is the man, the myth, the beard, Ginger Ninja JK, as always, popping with a comment. What? I'm sure I left a comment last week. It was rather lengthy one too. Ha ha ha. Well, they always say it's a lengthy one, JK. Just saying.
Promises.
They always say it's a lengthy one, but really it's a short series. Anyway, what have I been watching? Touchwood and The Simpsons Treehouse of Horrors.
Was that Touchwood or Torchwood?
Torchwood.
Okay. Misheard that.
And Simpsons Treehouse of Horrors. First 31 episodes for 31 days of Halloween. Yeah, a lot of people do that. I tried doing that one year and I remembered some of them. I like the zombie one. A lot of them just kind of like, oh, yeah, I remember this. And I remember why I don't watch it every year. So that was my thoughts on it.
Remember the Edgar Allan Poe one, but that one's always been a favourite of mine.
That one's okay. I like that one. But right, carrying on. Loved the OG movies and the series and TNG movies, DS9 and Voyager. Never watched Enterprise.
Another one.
Started Discovery, but never got into it after the first 2 or 3 episodes. That is pretty much the mass consensus on it, JK, is that Discovery, don't bother.
Enterprise was watched by my father, but he tried watching Discovery. He got the first episode, he turned it off. It seems like the mass consensus.
JK goes on to say the new Star Trek movies, as in the 09 film and onwards, I enjoyed. They weren't as good as some of the other OG ones or even the TNG ones, but lens flare. Feck off with that. You're blinding me. Yeah, that, like I said in the episode, that was everyone's general feeling was that, yeah, it was a good film, but the lens flare, fucking hell. Way too much. And then, right, Discovery. I was intrigued by the first few episodes, but it didn't grab me or draw me in. Picard, it was okay. Enjoyed it enough, but never got onto the 3rd season. I may do that now. Great episode. I'm looking forward to next week's discussion. Yeah, as I said in the episode, Picard season 3, it's good in one way, but bad in the other because it forgets so much of what was set up at the end of season 2 to do a big fan servicey season. Yeah. So it's good and bad. It's mixed.
In a way, that could be a good and a bad thing in the fact that you can watch the first 2 seasons if you're really into it. But if you don't want to watch the first 2 seasons, you're not really missing much by just skipping to season 3.
Well, you could watch season 1, watch season 3, and just watch the highlights for season 2. You don't really need to invest too much time because, like I said, a lot of the plot points that are set up at the end of season 2 pretty much forgotten about come season 3.
the same with season 1. Nothing's carried over from season 1 into season 3. So you
Right.
could watch just season 3 as a if you're interested, or watch the other two if you because
But moving swiftly on, we have a comment from the Calico Crichton himself, the son of the Pertwee, Mr. Tony Harris from over at the Retro Movie Zone, and he says, "Hi guys, son of the Pertwee, also known as the Calico Crichton. My sincerest apologies for taking so long to catch up with the latest Higgis episodes." I'm going to have a talk about that at the end of this season. Time Lordy type things to take care of, don't you know? Those bloody Daleks been at it again, making a nuisance of themselves, bleeding oversized pepper pots. Tony, when you go whole hog with a Doctor Who reference, you go all in, and I love that. More of that, please.
Yeah.
Anyway, cracking opening episode. I've made a ton of notes, which I'll be digging into on my next recording next Sunday.
Ooh.
Try reading that when you have this legs.
I've got to catch up with Tony's.
Yeah.
I'm a bit behind. Sorry about that, man.
Moving on to the second episode of your Star Trek extravaganza later today, which brings me up nicely up to date. Looking forward to Wednesday's episode as always. Great work, folks, and hi to Jimmy Lee. You got a hi from Tony.
I got a hi. I feel honoured. Thank you, Tony. I will catch up with your little show because I have been watching. I know I don't leave comments. I've got to do that. I keep having to do that.
Best way to do it is on the group. That's how I do it.
Yeah.
When I'm watching.
I'm trying to make comments. It's like I watch a lot of Tony. I watch a lot of Tony's stuff on my breaks and things at work. But I've had a lot to deal with, as Calista well knows. So.
But full disclosure, what I tend to do is on a Saturday morning when Tony drops the video, I will sit and watch it, which I've got to move, on my TV behind me because I have YouTube on my PS4. But when I'm sat on the sofa, I've got my phone in hand with the group open. So as I'm watching the episode, I'm making comments as I'm going. And then when the episode's finished, I hit post. That's why my comments are like this. You know, they're...
Funnily enough, when I'm actually commenting on this show,
it's what you're doing.
I do a very similar thing.
Hey, why not? So say it while it's there, fresh in your brain.
Yeah,
why
yeah.
not?
It's
Why
just
not?
like if I don't do it there and then, I forget. That's why I was having that little last minute post for a while. Sorry about that, guys.
But moving on very quickly, we're going to get into that question asked since the dawn of time when King Tootin Ra turned round to Pete the blacksmith and went, "What you been watching, mate?"
Well, this week, I think we've skipped CSI this week. I think we might have watched an episode of Law and Order at some point. We've been watching their Winchester boys.
Same.
I caught up because I'm sad as well because if anybody's watching that, Amazon are about to start charging for it. So I'm not going to be able to do that. I've got to now go and borrow some DVDs.
You've got about, I think it's about 12 days at time of recording.
And considering I'm only on the Scarecrow episode of season 1, I'm not going to make that journey.
I am halfway through the final episode of season 10. I have 5 more seasons to go in 12 days. I'm going to marathon it.
Yeah. So there's also a little pre-warning, folks. I was left unsupervised this week on this matter and had to do my own research.
Yes. But anything else you've been watching?
So, as a result, I have also watched Akira.
No. Just you've watched some stuff for tonight's subject.
I've watched some stuff related to what we're going to talk about, but I watched this one I'm not talking about. I watched Akira. I watched a couple of films I will talk about, but we'll get back to those.
Okay.
Might be a hint if you can spot it in the background. And I've watched a bit of YouTube. Other than that, watched some more X-Men than usual, really. So not more.
I have watched them there, Winchester Boys. Like I said, I'm on the back end of season 10 currently, going to finish that after recording this. And for most of the week since I found out that it was leaving Prime, that's pretty much all I've been watching. So
She's determined, folks.
I'm going to get through the final 5 seasons. I've not come this far to not see the ending.
Got 5 seasons.
I've
in
worked
2
it out. I've done the math. I've done the math, right? Because back in the day when Buffy was at its heyday, I was buying the DVD box sets when they first come out. Expensive, I know. And I worked it out that one whole DVD box set from start to finish without the special features is roughly about 9 hours.
Yeah.
That means that if I watch nothing but Supernatural every day, I can get through the next 5 seasons by the end of next week before it goes off. That is what. So next week's episode, just to pre-warn the viewers, next week's episode, when it gets to this very segment of what you've been watching, my answer is going to be Supernatural. Nothing but.
And nothing but. It's going to be very short.
Be a short fucking segment like what you've been watching. Supernatural.
You'll get more from Guy.
all of it. All of it's in my brain. But anyway, moving on. But yes, right. So then that brings us on to the subject of tonight's episode. Now, Jimmy, I'm going to ask you to not interrupt me while I have this little rant. I have been planning this little barrage of information, this little rant, this little Charlie Day conspiracy wall meme fucking thing for quite some time now. I've been planning this for quite some time now, so just let me have my say and then we'll get into the discussion of everything. Now, I wanted to call this episode, Is Originality a Myth? Now, where this came from was when people were complaining about certain recent remakes, The Crow in specific, right? This got me on a bit of a thought tangent. Now, full disclosure, people, I suffer with insomnia, so sleep for me is sometimes a bit of an elusive mistress. So on those moments when I can't sleep, I'm just mulling things over in my head, like subjects for the podcast and things like that. And it got me thinking that there's so many people that complain about remakes, but then they will say that a film like The Thing or The Fly or Scarface are absolute cinematic masterpieces. They're horror classics. They're gangster classics. They're actually remakes. The Fly is a remake of a film with the same title that starred Vincent Price. The Thing is a remake of a Howard Hawks classic from the 1950s, where the monster was most famously described to as a giant carrot. Yeah. Make of that what you will. But so this leads me on to like a little rant. This is the rant part that I'm trying to get out of the way here. Okay, so when you break it down, everything is kind of a remake of everything else that has come before it. Now, if you go way back to the beginning of cinema, one of the oldest recorded films that has literally just turned 100 years old is the film Nosferatu, the first ever vampire film. Now, technically, you could say that things like Dracula, the Bela Lugosi from the Universal Monster time period, is a remake of Nosferatu. But when we get onto the subject of Universal Monsters, you've got Dracula, Frankenstein, the Mummy, the Wolfman. Late 1930s going into the 1940s, these were the big popular monster movies of the time. Then you get to the Hammer horror monsters in the 60s and late 50s going through to the 60s and the 70s, right? Now, I don't want to say that they're remakes of the Universal Monster movies, but you've got people like Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing, and Vincent Price playing the roles of characters like Frankenstein, Dracula, the Wolfman, and the Mummy.
Yeah.
Now, the thing that gets me here is people hold both of those up in the same kind of regard. And it's like, well, Hammer is basically a remake of the Universal Monster movies. Then you jump forward another 20 or 30 years, and that brings us to the slasher boom of the 1980s, where we didn't get the same old monsters.
No, we
but
got some new ones.
We got a load of new ones, but
What?
they kind of followed a lot of the same tropes, and you look at these films, Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, Friday the 13th, you look at these, and there is vague inspirations coming from these old horror classics. And then that brings us up to the mid 2000s, where we started getting remakes of the 80s.
The remakes.
The 80s horror classics and things like that. So this is where I'm kind of circling with the idea of there is originality within Hollywood. People keep saying, "Oh, it's originality bankrupt in Hollywood at the moment. It's just superhero films and remakes." But I'm sorry, but it's kind of always been that way. And I think
like that for a while.
And this,
I think I feel a bit better on my research now because
right. And this for me kind of cements where I wanted to circle this off on a sort of a positive note and get us on to the second half of tonight's subject. For me, I'm starting to look at remakes now as it's a generational thing, right? We've talked about this previously with Star Trek, the fact that these franchises, some of these franchises that are still getting filmed and remakes, are franchises that have been around for the better part of 30, 40, 50, some of them even 60 years at this point, right? So, to end it on a more positive note, I want to take a look at examples of when a remake is done right, a couple of when remakes are done wrong, and a couple of ideas for films that should be remade and the reasons why some of these films should be remade. So to end on a slightly positive note with this little rant here, I think that we have to take remakes on face value. And I talked about this a lot with the 2016 Ghostbusters. I actually kind of like it. There's some stuff in it that I wish they'd done in the original, like the testing of the gear, but that's a tangent for another time. I think we need to give reboots and remakes a little bit more of a leeway when we're getting older. I'm in my 40s now. I'm happy to admit that.
I'm 2 years off it.
And I just look at these remakes, reboots, reimaginings, whatever, as they're not made for me. I have my beloved originals that I can watch instead of these reboots. But does that mean I should badmouth it without even watching it? No. So that is going to stop from me. Even if I think a film should not be remade, when it comes out, I will still give it a viewing. Because then I've made the informed decision and gone, no, I still prefer the original. But that's what we're going to get into now. So, Jimmy Lee, your thoughts very quickly on the myth of originality within Hollywood. Do you think I'm kind of right with the fact that everything
is
either a remake of something or it's inspired by something?
Yeah, after doing the research for a number of these, some of the ones I've picked, left unattended, unsupervised, doing the research and hyper focusing like an absolute beast. Yeah, some of these, yeah, you are kind of right. I feel like you say, it's a generational thing. We missed something off the Star Trek one. I've watched all the original Star Trek series, so TARS, TNG, all of them. Watch Discovery and you saw my reaction.
But there are
that's not. You know what? After bad mouthing it, and if Guy enjoys it, Guy enjoys it. But that's not one made for me.
Exactly.
It's not one made for me. But if Discovery, for example, went like I say, my son watches a number of the programs I'm watching. If my son ends up having fond memories of Discovery and then goes and watches TNG and all the ones I watch,
you just kind of hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
because I've mentioned something.
If that gets him in, it's something of a commonality, and I'm still young enough to be able to grow up and go and have these discussions.
I've mentioned this on previous episodes, right, where we talk about a long-running franchise, right? Me and Guy, we've done this on previous episodes where we used to talk about, like, how were we first introduced to this franchise? And we always, both of us, have always pointed to it's the first thing we saw of it that got us into it. Like for me, X-Men, as much as I love X-Men, it was not the comic books that got me into them. It was the original animated cartoon that got me into
X-Men. Same here.
Right?
Same here.
So even X-Men 97, right? That could have bombed spectacularly, but it didn't. And your son, have to say this, your son is living proof that it's pulling in a new generation of fans.
And that is actually right, because as daft as it sounds, we watched 97 first,
and then
he's now watching what I watched as a kid.
Exactly. And so it is definitely one of those things where sometimes franchises need this reboot or remake or reimagining or this shot in the arm, not to anger the old fans, but to bring in some new ones, because the old fans have seen it all now. There's a whole generation who want to get into it, but because the lore is so deep, they can't. So it brings more attention. It brings more attention to the franchise. If you reboot it, and it either way, whichever way it goes, whether it flops or it's a fucking success, it brings more attention to the original. The Crow is a perfect example.
Again, if I want to watch Star Trek, I've got my wife and my child in the room, I'm going to pick one of the new Chris Pine films because I know my wife will enjoy. She'll watch DS9, but if I can't watch DS9, I'm going to pick one of the other ones that are newer, because she enjoys watching that with me. So I get to watch Star Trek, and they get to enjoy family time with me. But if I'm on my own, then I might pick TOS. I might pick.
But we need to move this on now, Jim. Right, I'm going to jump in with my first example of being one of those naysayers who were like, no, that film should not be remade. I do not want to see this film. And then when I finally did watch it, I was like, you know what? I like it. So for me, my first example of how to do a remake and do it justice, we have Night of the Living Dead, the original and the remake. Now, for me, these are two very different films. Although it follows a general kind of cabin in the woods, they find an evil book, they get possessed by demons plot line, both of them have very different things happen in them. Both tell very interesting stories. If anything, with this one, I have to praise the special effects because most of it is practical effects. And my God, right? You thought this one was gory. For its day, the budget held it back. This one, the budget did not hold it back. So for me, like, if you wanted to watch a good update of a horror classic, this version of The Evil Dead, for me, is just as good as this version of The Evil Dead. So that is my first pick for how to do a remake justice. Have you seen either of these, Jimmy Lee, or you're not being a big
As you well know, I'm not as fond of my horrors, and especially the zombie sort of ones. So I'm aware of them. I've watched clips and things, but I haven't watched them.
Well, all I'm going to say on that subject is when Miss Violet comes back, that's going to change.
Yes, I could see that one being one of the first. But like I say, I'm aware of it. And I do like, this is my chainsaw, this is my broomstick. So yeah, that might be a very good pick for me to have a look into and try and dip my toe in.
Right. Do you have a pick for where it's a good example of you enjoyed the original as much as the remake, or do you have an example of how not to remake?
Excellent supervised, and maybe I've hyper focused. In the background, you may be able to see War of the Worlds.
Yes, I did.
Now, this is originally this is a book H.G. Wells made.
Yeah, it's been through a lot of media's work.
And this has been through a lot. It's got The research, it's got about 7, maybe 8
Oh yeah,
different
there's
variations.
been films, TV
Films,
shows,
it's got
musical, books,
films, TV series, it's
radio
got
play.
radio play, it's got a lot.
Yeah,
This has been remade, right? It's not
multiple
even the
times.
original. This the other thing is the book isn't even the original. Most people quote this as being the first inspiration of an alien invasion by Earth to Earth from aliens and taking it. It's not. The germ growers actually is, and that's actually more in line with the body snatchers. So
But that's a tangent for another episode.
that's another tangent for another episode. Um, my first introduction is the vinyl behind me.
Same. I had that same introduction thanks to my parents.
It's a classic vinyl.
I did
I
see the
later
original
then
film, though.
watched the 52 film.
It is for its time as well. I mean,
It's not aged well, that 52.
well,
I think
no,
it's
but I think me and Guy have talked about this before. That War
film's
of the World,
53, sorry.
the War of the World, the original War of the Worlds film, for its time was
Oh,
so.
it was scary.
It wasn't only scary; it's just there hadn't been that level of destruction seen on film.
Yeah, it's a
You know,
proper disaster. That's a proper
proper,
old
proper
school
disaster
disaster
movie.
film.
Yeah, that's
And
what I
they've
mean.
got
It's a
some.
sci-fi disaster movie. You know,
I
it's
don't know, or I can't remember all the people who were acting in that, but there were some
oh
high level actors
for their
that were
time.
getting killed off. They're like you'd think these are people that don't normally get killed off in
Yeah,
a film. They get
yeah,
killed off left,
that's
right, and center. It's a proper disaster film.
yeah, yeah.
The 2005 remake
Hmm.
with Tom Cruise.
I had mixed feelings about that one. I'll be honest.
Yeah, I had mixed feelings.
I'll jump in here with it, so you can have your bit with it. But for me, the 2005 film was a bit of a mixed bag. Like the general story was good.
Yeah,
I liked
followed more the line of the journalist.
I liked the action. I just think certain roles in it were a little bit miscast, and that's I'm just going to leave it at that. But overall, I enjoyed it, and I think it was a good update to at that time it was made a 50-year-old film. You know, it was a good update to it. So,
yeah, and again, it's had an update. It's had an update since then with the Robert Carlyle, which is kind of you can watch that as more of a little bit of a film or a mini series. That one.
There was a mini series back in the 90s. It was like War of the Worlds after the invasion or something like that.
Yeah.
I never really watched it. It was
And
late night TV. I caught an episode or two here or there.
yeah, and again, this is one of these ideas. I can see it being covered again.
It's one of those sort of mainstays of.
Right,
It will always be there.
It's one of them franchises that goes under the radar.
Yes. But right, moving on to my next pick. Again, another example of not only if you're going to do a remake of a film, why not bring back the original guy to write it? And why not bring back one of his best mates to direct it? I am talking, and JK, you'll love me for this one. I am talking the original Night of the Living Dead and the 90s remake of Night of the Living Dead, both with George A. Romero's name on them. This version of it was directed by special effects wizard Tom Savini in his directorial debut. Now, for me, this is a little bit, and I'm using this term loosely, the Psycho remake with Vince Vaughn, where it was basically a shot-for-shot remake of the original film. Didn't change a damn thing. Whereas this, the remake for this takes what this one does and just polishes it, makes it that little bit tighter, tidier, more gruesome, more less cheesy acting. It goes from being a drive-in B movie to a hot studio Hollywood kind of movie. But for me, as much as I love the OG, I have to go with this one as my preferred pick because not only do you have a wonderful performance for Barbara from stuntwoman Patricia Tallman, you also have the absolute legend, the Candyman himself, Tony Todd, playing the part of Ben. And I actually saw him in this straight after seeing him in Candyman, and I could not believe it was the same actor because they're so polar opposites. But if you've
He's a
never
very
seen,
good actor, and he turns up in Star Trek.
yeah,
He's
and
Roy
if you've never seen this version of Night, if you've seen this version but never seen this one, get it, watch it, you'll freaking love it. But yes, that's another example of how to do a remake right. Jimmy Lee, guessing you've not seen because it's zombies.
Again, yeah, sorry, I missed that one. So I can't really add to that one. Unfortunately, I'm not the horror fan that you want me to be yet, but we'll work on that.
Well, I've mostly picked
Almost
horror,
like
so we're in for
grab
a
her
good time
chairs and
here.
drag me kicking and screaming.
We're in for a good time here. I picked mostly horrors. So come on then. Your next example of great remake versus why did they remake it? Or do you just want to jump on with your
Well,
little
the funny thing is, we've already kind of mentioned this one because it's the Fly.
buzzing in the back of your brain by any chance?
Buzzing at the back of my brain, The Fly. That film, as daft as it is, 86, the 86 release one is the one I watched first, and that film is as old as I am.
I watched that. That was the first version I watched as well.
Yeah. And then I managed to this week, and that's why I say I had to leave this. I managed to finally watch the original Fly after being put off by it from my mother and father. They said it's going to be a comedy and everything like that. Do you know what? I actually liked it. I enjoyed it. It got some very good concepts.
It's
not aged.
atmospheric.
It's not aged. It's not aged as a horror well.
No, but just as an interesting film.
Yeah. As an interesting concept and film, yeah. It's aged well. And it's Vincent Price, I've been aware, we had this discussion off camera, folks, tangent. Vincent Price is a guy I've been aware of, unlike Elvira.
He's lost more points off of his geek card.
Yeah.
This is the first film for Vincent Price.
Yeah. And do you know what? I really enjoyed watching Vincent Price on film. He's got a very lovely voice.
He is an
That's the one thing I was aware of. I knew of Vincent Price, and he's got a lovely voice. Watching him in a full length picture with that voice, doing what he was doing, it did make the film a bit better as well.
On a tangent with that, then, if you want to check out another wonderful Vincent Price movie, and it has been remade, so it kind of qualifies for what we're talking about here. House of Wax. It was remade with Paris Hilton.
You know what? I've seen that multiple. I've seen that in a DVD store, in a bundle bin, and I've looked at it, and I've looked at the back of it, and I've thought about watching that multiple times.
It's a remake.
I did not know Vincent Price was in it.
The original, yes, not the Paris Hilton version.
Yeah, I don't know which version I picked up or seen, but I did. You know, the premise
probably
of that,
if you've seen it in video stores recently, you'll probably find it's more than likely the remake, which I think was like 2008, 2009.
Yeah. I'll go and see it. What I'll do with that one, unlike this one with The Fly, I'll go and try and watch the Vincent Price original. Then watch the remake. I'll try and do it the right order.
There you go, then.
So
The Fly. Yes, I'm in full agreement with you. They're both because they're so vastly different.
Yeah,
and
the first one was more like a detective.
Yeah, and this goes back into
kind of idea. The second one's more of a scientific horror.
Yeah, and this is what I'm saying. I can guarantee
and the practical effects hold up.
I can guarantee you, right, that there was fans of the original Vincent Price movie, right, when it was announced that the Fly, the Goldblum version, the Cronenberg interpretation was announced and coming to cinemas. When it was trailers were shown, I guarantee you there was a generation of old people who'd watched the Vincent Price film and gone, "Oh God, not a remake." And this is what I'm saying. I think it's a generation.
It's starting to sound like our grandparents.
Yeah. My grandparents probably would have seen the original Vincent Price film, loved it to bits. And then when this body horror, grotesque fly vomiting hands and feet melting off of people, there's a whole generation of like grandparents who were like, "Oh my God, I'm like, I can't watch that." Like, but they love the original. And that's what I'm saying is that a remake
See, my mum,
isn't necessarily
that
new.
helps with the generational thing. My mum and dad put me off watching the original
Same.
and put me off watching the remake, right? Because they said the original's basically a comedy. You're gonna laugh at that. But they said the remake, you won't be able to handle the body horror to it,
Yeah.
right? And it'll be too scary for you. So, and my mum and dad, it's one of the only films my mum and dad have ever actually watched in 2 sittings. They got part way through but ended up coming out the other side and were like, this is a really good film. So, like, the original was just, it hasn't aged well. That come out in 58, the year before.
The one thing I will say about the original Fly is, okay, compared to modern day films, I mean, it was made in the 50s, for fuck's sake. Give it some slack. It's nearly 100 years old. Fuck off. Let's see how good you are at 80, yeah?
But you're falling apart a little bit like Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah, for me, that original, it's very atmospheric and it sets a very... Okay, it has got some comedic elements with it, and I don't think they were intentional. I can only assume that back in the 50s when that came out, the whole "help me" thing was fucking like, oh my god, that's horrific. Now we look at it like, oh my god, that's kind of funny. Like
they'd have me in stitches.
Yeah,
I had to pause it.
But there's scenes where it does the flashbacks where they show you with him with the fly head and the fly hand and everything, and they're going through the motions. It's very like, that's a weird, odd tone.
When I watch that scene, even though, you know what, even with some of the, like, it's dated, yes, it's funny. The premise is for, but that whole spider coming in
on my face because it's
if you can take away the fact what you're watching and it's clearly stop motion and old, and you actually apply that to a bit more what that's kind of terrifying.
But moving swiftly on with my next pick for great examples of a remake. I do not have the original. I have seen the original. I love the original. But for me, I bigged this up towards Tony just recently over on his group on Facebook. This film, for me, is how to top the original, how to be better than the original. The Crazies, remake of a George Romero movie. And when I say it takes what the original did and just cranks it up to 11, it's definitely a case of the original was a low budget and it was held back by its budget. This was like, what budget? What budget? They drop a fucking nuke at one point in the fucking film.
How much do you need to make this film? This much. Okay, I tell you what, I'll just leave a check that's blank, write it down afterwards, and make.
I have the lenticular cover, so it's very
very shiny. You
can see it sort of moving and whatnot. But if you've never seen The Crazies, I highly recommend watching it. I'm not going to spoil too much. It's basically a bioweapon, a chemical weapon that was developed by the government to destabilize a population by driving people insane and then killing them, is accidentally released in a small town in the USA, a town called Ogden Marsh. The remake stars Timothy Oliphant and Rhonda Mitchell. And like I said, for me, it's just, if you're going to remake a horror classic, this is how you do it. The fights in it, the gore in it, and the desperation sometimes of the characters is fucking believable. Like, for me, I watched this on a random. I was like, it's a remake. It's not going to be any good. Boy, was I wrong. I actually prefer this version to the original now. So, again, you've not seen this, have you? Because it's a horror. Well, fuck it. With my last one.
I like, I like psychological thrillers.
Right, well, then we'll quickly jump onto my last one for a perfect example of a remake. We don't need to say much more other than this. The Thing.
The Thing. again, this is one on my watch list, folks.
Right.
I
Well,
want to watch this. I just haven't got round to
we
it.
mentioned this at the beginning of the show. This is actually a remake already, and it was actually much like we've just mentioned earlier, how a remake can bring attention to the original. I only knew the original existed. I only knew the original existed because I watched this one. And it came with the special features and everything. It talks about the original. And that was when I was like, the thing's a remake? I hate remakes. How can this be a remake?
I've been deceived.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. I think originality is a little bit of a fucking myth because if something this good can be considered the original classic when actually it's a fucking remake, then I'm sorry, but. And that's my last pick for perfect examples of how to do remakes.
In that case,
do you want to do one of a perfect example of how not to do a fucking remake?
I've actually got 3 left, and I'll let the one I'll leave to last is one I intend on watching, but I don't hold much weight in this.
Okay, come on then.
So, Lost in Space is one I picked.
Film based on a show. Film based on a show.
It was a film based on a show that I was unaware of at the time.
See, I did know of the original show going into the film because I remember it coming out in cinemas and it was a whole big thing because Matt LeBlanc was in it and he was famous for being Joey in Friends at the time, right?
Yeah, at the time, folks, we're going back a number of years now because it was 98 when that film was released.
Yeah.
I would have been 12 at the time. So I saw this in the pictures and I saw the film. I liked it. I've heard it didn't get good reviews, but I'm looking at it back now as a 12-year-old.
See, again, this ties into what I said earlier, where it's kind of your first impression of it that will solidify whether you like it or not. And for you, with that being your first introduction into Lost in Space, I can understand why you would look back on it with fond memories. Because it's like, I was young. I went, it's the nostalgia.
I actually had the robot. I actually went out and I bought the robot that was in that film.
I had the deluxe one. I had the big ass thing.
Yeah. So I had that robot and I wanted the Jupiter 2, and I really quite like that film. But I'm looking at it now, I was age 12 at the time. But this thing was brought out in 65, ran up to 68 for 3 seasons. The actors didn't know there weren't going to be a season 4, and it got panned. And then, funnily enough, since 69, CBS brought out Star Trek. So that might have been why
Lost in Space got syndicated. Very much like Star Trek, Lost in Space got syndicated, which is how I first saw it. I was fully aware of Lost in Space before the film came out. And when I went to see it, all right, when I went to see
I've done things in a bit of an odd order for this pick because I watched the film, went back and saw some of the original.
Yeah.
Could understand, its age, took that into account. And then I've jumped forward because they've then remade the series as a 3-series thing in 2018.
Yeah, I tried to watch that. I tried to watch that series. I could not get into it. But going back to the film because it's something we've both seen. Like I said, I saw the original stuff. I knew what it was going into the remake, and there were certain callbacks that I was like, oh yeah, that's like referencing this and this, and like the pain thing and danger, all that shit. And I liked it for what it was. It annoyed me that it ended on a fucking cliffhanger and we never got a resolution to that. I'd like to see them do like a belated sequel to that,
I mean, if they're interested in doing, that falls into this later category. Things like should carry on.
But the new series that they did, I tried to watch it. I put the first episode on and fell asleep like that. It did not hook me.
That particular series, when I watched that, it took me 2 attempts to watch the first episode. second and third episode started getting me in, and I've got a 3-episode rule these days, folks. So I got in, and then I ended up watching all of it. And honestly, I like the update. There's certain things that do not
Yeah.
they aren't as good as the original or the film, and then there's things that are better, and I think all of it ends up working together. So I feel that that's a nice,
So
it's a
come on
good
then.
one, and I've got a feeling they'll do it again because it is, like I said,
Maybe.
it's a
I
60,
mean,
it was a 65 release of the original series. 2025, it's his 60th anniversary.
you never know. Maybe when we're in our 80s, there'll be another revival of it, but you never know.
Yeah.
Right then, what is your last pick for a remake slash versus original? Is it as good, or oh god, why did they do this?
I'm going to go off on a real tangent with you
Oh,
because I've done sci-fi. Now I'm going to go to Western.
here
Django.
we go. Here we go.
Django.
This one was coming.
You had a feeling, did you?
I thought it was either going to be Django or fucking True Grit.
Django.
True Grit would have been
My introduction to Django is the 2012 release with Jamie Foxx, Quentin Tarantino. But I watched this first,
Yeah.
and you can tell off the soundtrack. Some of these are older soundtrack.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a
So
homage to the original show.
yeah, it's a homage.
Yeah.
This is a
But
remake,
it
folks.
works
It's a
very well,
homage.
I have
It's
seen
done.
Django. I haven't.
The funniest part is there's a cameo. There's a cameo in the new Django by the original Django, and it's the bar scene where they've gone into the Mandingos, and you've got that. Jamie Foxx is ordering a drink. The guy who stands next to him is the original Django. It's Franco Nero, who played the original Django in the '66 film,
I did not
and he
know.
asks, "What's your name?" Django. And can you spell it? And he spells it. The D is silent. That is actually,
Yes.
it's the original actor from the original film from '66. And that '66 film was classed so violent it did not get a British release until 1993.
Yeah.
Right? So, and that entire film series has spawned 30 odd sequels.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That aren't actually sequels. The only actual sequel, and I'm going to have to check my notes, the actual sequel that was done with Franco Nero and Sergio Corbucci was done in '87, and it's Django Strikes Again. That's the only one that's actually a direct sequel. All the others are kind of a homage to the original, and it absolutely changed all of spaghetti westerns.
Right then, moving on, because we're getting close to our timer out here point. But for the next and final segment of the show, in the spirit of giving reboots, remakes, reimaginings, whatever you want to call them, a little bit more of a chance.
Yeah.
We've both picked some films that we'd like to see be remade, and kind of the reason why we'd like to see them be remade. And I will go first. We talked about this one earlier. We've talked about this one before on multiple fucking occasions. I would love to see a out and out, balls to the wall, make it as silly or as serious as you want, remake of Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. Because sometimes you just need a film that is a bit of good, dumb fun. Disconnect your brain, just sit and watch and enjoy what's going on the screen. And giant tomatoes running around eating people would just be the ultimate popcorn movie for me. It doesn't have
in this day and age, it would really be interesting, especially with all the vegans in town.
Yeah, I mean,
having vegetables,
you know,
eat humans, that would be quite the fun thing.
Exactly. I mean, there's a satire and spoof moment for you there. A vegan getting eaten by a fucking tomato. There you go. You've got a scene right there. I mean, as daft as that.
Don't be eating meat. Om nom nom by a vegetable.
Yeah, exactly. You know. Meat is murder, and then a tomato chomps them. Yeah, but it's fucking tasty. You know what I mean? Like they could
Totally organic.
They could go so off the wall with the premise with it and just have fun with it, like the original did. The original knew it was a parody. It knew it was a B movie. It knew it was making
Knew
fun.
what it was and it did what it needed to do. And
and
it's
I
not
think
the cartoon.
yeah, there was the cartoon series. There was a sequel, Return of the Killer Tomatoes, which was fairly decent. I have seen it. It's a mixed bag. The cartoon is more based on the sequel than the original film.
This is the thing. I remember the cartoon. This is my awareness of it. It's the cartoon.
Yeah.
Because of my awareness of horror, like the Toxic Crusader, that was a cartoon. I didn't watch the films. I watched the cartoon.
You'd be surprised how many horror films and adult-rated action films back in the 80s got cartoon series. RoboCop got a cartoon series. Fucking Rambo, a film about a PTSD-riddled fucking Vietnam War veteran, got a fucking cartoon in the mid-1980s. You'll have to excuse my throat, folks. I'm having a bit of a sore throat today. But yeah, we're going to wrap this up now with films we'd like to see. Sorry, I've already covered that.
Yeah, you have.
I think it's my
pick. What?
Your pick for one film you'd like to see remade because it hasn't had one already.
This one might cause some controversy with some viewers. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Oh no, classic kind of no.
Yeah.
No.
I think
if Guy was here, he'd back me up on this one.
Oh, he'd back. I know he wouldn't. I'm glad he's away this week for this reason.
That is an untouchable classic.
It's a Jack Nicholson classic. I have watched.
No, you can't
remake. It's been a while
that.
Since I watched that one.
Can't remake that one. I'm sorry, it's not allowed. I'm not allowed.
I think that one should be remade, especially.
There you go. I snapped my fingers. I made
nothing else. And I thought about this because I thought about when we mentioned it off camera, and I thought I'm going to pick this one because I knew this would be a good one, and I feel that one could do with a remake because two things: if you film it in the style, like you modernize it for the generation it was in, that's the only way I can see you doing it because of the certain scenes.
I think it would work better. I think it would work better as a period piece. It sounds daft. But
that's what I'm saying. Like
film it as though it was set in the year. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. If you film it in the year that right, I feel that this one would be good as a remake based on that premise of this is how we used to treat mental patients.
Yeah.
It gives a reflection of how we treat mental patients now, and it also makes it aware again because this is something that does need to be made aware of, and is me made aware of slowly about mental issues in this day and age. This is how we used to treat them. This is how we treat them now. And also it raises awareness, well, maybe we should be treating them even better than that.
Well, fair enough. I can understand
so I feel that one, but honestly, the original, I feel like...
I can understand your reasoning for choosing it, though. Yeah. I think doing an updated version of it set at the time.
The original. That's what I'm saying. As a remake, it would be an updated version rather than a...
That's one of those ones that could, if you did that, it would either go great.
It's one of them. It's either going to fly or it's going to crash.
My next pick, because I've always loved this film, even the original cut of it, even though it was a janky mess back in the day. Having watched the director's cut a couple of years ago, well, about a year or so ago for the first time, and falling in love with it all over again. I think it needs either a belated sequel or a remake. I'd be happy with either. And my pick for this one is Clive Barker's Nightbreed. Now, I take it yet again, another one you will not have seen.
No, not currently.
Right. The story of Clive Barker's Nightbreed is there's a man called Boone who's having these dreams about a city called Midian, but he's also having dreams that he's a masked killer. He's not. And weirdly enough, we talked about The Fly. David Cronenberg does star in this film. So But I won't say too much more of it because to do that would be to spoil it. But if you've never seen Nightbreed, get the director's cut. Don't watch the theatrical cut. Get the director's cut. It's much better of a film. But that for me needs either a sequel or a remake, purely because it is such a powerful story where you see these people who look quite monstrous, but it's actually the humans who are actually the monsters of that story. And I really like that kind of juxtaposition of it. Of these creatures look so grotesque and horrifying, but they're the good guys. They're the ones you should be rooting for. And for me, absolute horror classic. It's more, like you were saying, psychological. It does play more into that field than it does sort of splatter horror. There, it has its moments, don't get me wrong, but it's definitely more makes you think. So highly recommend giving that a watch. And also, if there's going to be a remake, please, much like they've done with Hellraiser, keep Clive Barker involved. Your next one, then.
I was a little thin on this particular one because research time became limited.
Well, I've got two more if you need me to fill the gap.
But I did manage it. There's two. I've got two. One's never been done as film or anything. The other one, it's Robin Williams, and it is a bit of a classic. And this is, again, this might be a bit of a controversial one, but it's a favorite film of mine, Bicentennial Man.
To be fair, I think that film is still a bit too young.
I think it might be. I don't know. It's an often overlooked one in Robin Williams' catalogue.
It is overlooked. It's a very, very good film, but I think it's just. I was like
a little too young. This one might be for a few years later.
Yeah, it's barely 30 years at this point because I remember it coming out when I was like 16, 17. So yeah, that film for me, I
might be a little bit too young at the moment. I think it might be one that they should revisit because, like I say, the original is an overlooked one. The reason that gets overlooked, it's because of the other release that year that I know of, and that was the AI, which was hyped up. That film, I remember, that was hyped up, and that apparently, as far as I'm understanding, I could be wrong, that bombed.
Not really, but didn't really. Well, it wasn't a failure, but it wasn't a success. It was kind of
it was one of these that was hyped up, and it didn't fail, but it didn't exactly because they never remade anything or a sequel or anything for that one. And I think that one buried this better film.
To be honest, right, I think that we don't really need to remake Bicentennial Man because if you've been looking at social media recently, we're about to start fucking living it. We're about to start fucking living it. If you look at social media just recently,
if you look at certain things on social media, you kind of live in that. But
yeah, we don't need to remake Bicentennial Man. In 20 years from now, we'll be fucking living it. You know, so but we'll move on to my next choice.
Matrix people.
We'll move on to my next choice because it has been reported that there have been attempts to get a remake of this going. One of my personal, again, going with horrors, one of my personal favorites, purely because they had to create a new Oscar category for this film for special effects, and it is An American Werewolf in
that's a classic, and that's a fun film to watch.
The remake,
that's what I've watched.
There have been talks of a remake with Max Landis, the son of John Landis, the original writer and director, on the helm. Now, the general idea is that because is it Ivan Reitman's son, Jason Reitman, went on to do the newer Ghostbuster films, and they were quite well praised.
I've got a funny feeling you might be onto something there because those names do actually ring a bell with me for some
Yeah,
reason.
but
Yeah, I think you're on the right track.
the idea is that if they bring someone in who was a part of the family and they're interested.
Yeah.
Apparently, Max Landis is interested in doing a remake of An American Werewolf in London. Other than that, there's not been much said about it. So, on my wish list of hoping it does get a
That
remake,
was a
because
comedy as well.
I'm going to point this out now, right? I love this film. It won the Academy Award for its special effects. It created the
Special effects
category
Oscar.
of special makeup effects within movies. The reason why things like, all the other movies that have won it is because of this film. It is culturally significant. For me, though, as great as the special effects were for their time, they do, and this is the downside of living in the digital age where CGI can fix everything. There are moments where you look at it, you go, I can tell that's rubber skin, or I can tell that's this.
I funny you mentioned this film because I saw a clip on the YouTube pop up for me. You can so tell that they are CGI werewolves at one point.
That's the sequel. That's the sequel.
Is that the sequel?
Yes, An American Werewolf in Paris. That came out in the mid
Ah,
90s. This one is all practical, all in camera.
right. So yeah, because I've seen
Right.
the one that I've seen both of the films too, and I always
Next movie night, this is what we're watching. Anyway,
okay.
I hope there is a remake of that purely because if the son of the creator of the original is going to be working on it, I think it's in good hands and it can be done right.
Yeah.
And I fucking hope. We talked about me and Guy have mentioned this in a previous episode where we said that it's got just enough comedy layering it in certain moments, in certain scenes where it catches you off guard and you laugh even more because you don't expect it. I hope that in the remake they keep that sensibility where 1 minute you're seeing something like, oh my god, and then it's like, oh what what that actually just happened. Like, I hope they keep those little moments because that for me is what makes that film so memorable. The special effects and the horror, brilliant, but it's those comedy moments that when you're having a discussion about it, it's like, oh yeah, do you remember that bit? And people are like, oh fuck yeah, I love that bit. And that's the bit people always talk about. So, shall I wrap it up with one final one so that you don't have to struggle for another pick?
No, I've got one on here that is, and it's behind me. The entire book ream here is all the Dragons of Pern. And that's never been made as a film or anything.
Well, then that's not hope it gets a remake. That just hope it gets an interpretation. That's different.
I hope that, no. I'm going to go on a tangent and hope that eventually gets an interpretation. And then I'm going to hand it over to you. Because honestly, I feel these books have been with me since
I've never read them, so I can't comment. I do a
and that's another one. It's a very, very good storyline, and that it's sci-fi. It's got a bit of all the genres in, and it's like something that they could do a film to introduce it, and then do a TV series of it, and then do a film, and that, you know what I mean. It's something that they should do. And they keep doing these remakes, or they keep trying to, you want a new idea, do something you haven't covered. It's still in the book.
Well, exactly. I mean, that is kind of another sort of side of this as well. This is a kind of another side to this.
But that's another side to it,
where people are saying, "Oh, Hollywood's coming up with nothing original. It's just doing remakes and everything." It's like, well, there is stuff out there. It's just no one's bringing it to the attention of these studios to get the rights to turn these books into films, TV shows, fucking hell, animated series, whatever. But there is stuff out there. Just Hollywood's not bothering to look. But
you look at certain things like Game of Thrones started as a book. The H.G. Wells War of the Worlds started as a book. Harry Potter started as a book, folks.
Well, yeah, I don't like to mention that around here, but yes.
I know. I thought I'd throw that in. But, you know what I mean? Things like that, they start as books and they end up as films.
The Twisted Sisters started as a book. Oh, wait, is that just me wishful thinking? But
Essentially.
right, moving it on to my final choice of film that I would
Oh.
like to see be remade, purely because I think you could really go full satire with this, because it's such a it's the well that never ends, because it's all about reality TV nowadays.
Yeah.
For me, this is a kind of comedy classic. Tom Hanks, The Burbs. Now, if you've never watched this film, it's about a guy living in the suburbs.
The Burbs.
Yeah, and it's sort of the colourful, wacky characters that you meet living in the suburbs. And now, okay, over here in England, we kind of call them cul-de-sacs and stuff like that. But anyway, just the idea of a guy living in his neighborhood with his wacky neighbors and the crazy bullshit stuff
Goes down.
that goes down because of one paranoid neighbor, one misunderstood. A neighbor goes missing and they think that the new neighbors that have moved in have killed them. And it sets this whole chain of conspiracy stuff going off to the point where the guy gets arrested and hospitalized. It's just, if you've never seen The Burbs, seriously, check it out. It's a fantastic film. And I think that remaking it for a 2024 audience, you could poke fun at so many different people, like the Real Housewives and the Kardashians and people like that, because it's that kind of idea of
it's all these people on
these wacky, colourful characters that have been close together who don't really like each other.
You get the crazy nut job. You get the this is one. Unfortunately, I haven't watched it. Now that you've got that DVD, I'll be borrowing that because
I am a font of classic movies. Trust me, I only watch the good stuff. But I'd love to see a remake of that, just because with the way society is today, with the use of smartphones and social media,
you'd have that one. Yeah, you could have that one with all the CCTV footage and just go ape shit.
Yeah, you could really go. Really kind of out the box with it, with some of the ideas you could do with an update to The Burbs. What it's like to live in a cul-de-sac in 2024. Trust me, it's not changed.
As opposed to what that film presents at the age of that is at.
Yeah, exactly. And I think an updated version of The Burbs would just be fantastic for me. But that's it. That's films that we'd like to see rebooted. Examples of good ways to do a reboot or remake or whatever. Perfect examples of it does work sometimes, especially when you're looking at things like The Thing. But for the last part of the show, we are going to throw the question out to you, our wonderful viewing audience. What are some examples for you personally as a viewer of a remake done right, a remake done wrong, and a film you'd like to see be remade, and why? But that is it for tonight's episode. I have been Calista Valentine. He has been Jimmy Lee Clifford. And next week, things are going to get spooky because it's Halloween season. And maybe a certain behaunted bitch will show back up. Good night, everyone. Catch you in the next one. Bye.